This is the Bitcoin Made Simple podcast. Here's your host, Cory.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. On this week's episode, I talked to Gigi and Guy Swann together. Ever since I interviewed them both, I wanted to get them on together, and it was a great conversation to have with the two of them to, share their perspectives and get dialogue, which I didn't know they didn't have much dialogue between the two of them. They've met at a conference or two and haven't really been on too many podcasts together or anything. But obviously, Gigi's written a lot, and Guy has read what Gigi has written, and they both have been in the space for a while and offer a lot of great insight. So I wanted to talk to them about, longevity in Bitcoin and how to stick around for a long time, and make sure you don't go through Bitcoin derangement syndrome. We got into a couple things about hyperinflation and, is ban? Are they going to ban talk about that? And, will the USA 6102 the Bitcoin on exchanges? So it was a great conversation. Really glad to have them both there. And the episode is brought to you by Coinbase Connect. Do you have questions about Bitcoin? Personalize your learning and book a one-on-one video call with a Bitcoin pro on Coinbase Connect. Learn about mining, security, the Lightning Network, DeFi, taxes, and many other topics. It's really easy. Choose your topic and pro, select a date when you're available, and bring your questions to the meeting room. Book your first call today by going to Coinbeast.com and clicking on the Connect tab. Be prepared for the financial revolution and get the knowledge you need. And it's also brought to you by Movies Plus. It's my streaming platform. Go ahead and check it out. MyMoviesPlus.com is the website, but you can go into any app store on your phone or streaming device and search for Movies Plus, and you'll find the app in there. And you can sign up for a free trial, free 30-day trial. Check it out. Get to watch stuff. We have some Bitcoin content constantly going up there, but also lots of other movies. And if you're, getting ready for the Christmas season, or if you have a wife or girlfriend who loves watching Hallmarky Christmas movies, we have a trove of those that will be going up. So, you can get that for a free month during the Christmas season here. So thank you guys. And if you want to get in touch with me, just follow me on Twitter at Cory_Tusick, and you can follow the show at Bitcoin Simply, and you can email the show bitcoinmadesimplepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks.
I remember that.
Now that Gigi's in his body condom and nobody can see who he is. So, Guy, you were one of the people that he busted at a conference, and you had no idea you were talking to him, even though you talked to him.
Oh yeah, I had no idea. Yeah, him and Will Reeves actually were like right in line together, and I was like talking like kind of back and forth, and I was like, and then after he was like, "Yeah, I'm fucking Gigi, man." I was like, "You son of a bitch."
It's one of the joys of being a NIM is you can surprise people in real life.
I wish I could go back and be a NIM instead of like such a stupid thing. You're like, you put your face out there and then it's out there forever. Like, well,
what you don't realize is that I'm a NIM too. This is actually a prosthetic.
Yeah, and, exactly. That's one way to play it.
You put a little Bitcoin into it, man. You never know, man. Those prosthetics are good. Yeah.
Hollywood's getting good these days,
to be fair, you can still be in a it's quite easy actually. It's more difficult if you want to appear on video and have a voice and stuff like that, but spinning up a new identity and just becoming a NIM is super super easy. And I think going forward, depending on how things develop, of course, but technology wise, we have a lot of stuff where you can appear like as a cartoon character. You see a lot of Twitch streamers doing stuff like that, and it's very easy also to distort your voice. So if you ever want to go NIM, just go for it. It's I think we should not lose the NIM nature of Bitcoin and the internet, and I think it can also be a lot of fun. So I would encourage everyone who is thinking about doing NIM stuff to just go ahead and do it and see how it feels.
Yeah.
With the trajectory of society, we might all have to be NIMs.
Dude, that laser huddle dude, I'm convinced that he looks like his picture. Like his, I asked him that one time. I said, "Are you starting to confuse yourself?" And thinking, he said, "You know what? Surprisingly, I am. Like in my mind, I'm starting to envision myself as this picture."
Great
Crazy.
book, by the way. It's True Names by Werner Vinci, I think, and it's a great book. It's about names actually. It's about not using your true name online.
Yeah, yeah, very fitting. Um,
I don't think I
well,
added that to my list until your article on that, Gigi.
There you go. True names not required. That's Bitcoin for you.
so is that on your list of things to record?
Oh, I've already recorded that article. But I still haven't gotten to the book actually. But I've got a list of so many books.
Yeah.
to cover.
How many things seriously do you have to read? Because like whenever you see an Alex Gladstein tweet, you have to start sweating bullets. You're
Yeah,
just
I'm like,
oh god, no.
there's like a part of me that's like really excited, and there's a part of me like motherfucker again, and I know it's gonna be good, but son of a bitch, it's always long. It's always long.
Well, I'll have to introduce you guys eventually to the guy that's I'm partnering with on the just like he's doing his own podcast within the network together. He's from Australia, Luke, and he just wrote up a good article on his Medium, and it had like he did a whole thread about it, you know, hyperinflation, all that. Greg Foss was like all over it and everything. But he's a good writer, and it's gonna add you some more stuff to start reading again.
It was about inflation.
Yep. Yeah. 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 So just
I saved a couple of tweet threads recently on that sort of a topic, so I was wondering if maybe I had it. I don't know, I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, I wonder why tweets and tweet threads about inflation keep popping up. Do you guys have any idea why that might be the case?
No, that's
probably because of those price gouging companies.
Yeah, probably
terrible price gougers.
Well, this is perfect because this was number 2 on my list of things to talk about. But hyperinflation, you know. And by the way, thanks for both coming on, because ever since I talked to each of you separately, I was like, I got to get them together on a podcast, because I mean, you know, until we can meet
bad
space.
Choice. I fucking hate Gigi.
Yeah. Likewise, I hate Gigi too.
Dick.
No, it's actually great. I don't know why, but Guy and I, we don't manage to meet each other often and talk about. So I really cherish the opportunity.
Like moving around each other, right?
Yeah.
You guys are just in orbit of each other.
Seems like it.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
So yeah, I mean, we've seen, it's funny, you know, these hyperinflation tweets are popping up left and right. It might have been you, Gigi, earlier that I saw you maybe post or share something that somebody had shown, like somebody had tweeted out about how the US government was going to 6102 all the Bitcoin on Coinbase. And then like all of a sudden that account was suspended, you know, and it's like, I feel like people were going to eventually get suspended for talking about hyperinflation.
Yeah. I think, you know, there are so many things mixed up currently, and I think anytime it almost doesn't matter who it is, but if society at large or certain platforms or certain political movements or parties start to censor speech, I think you're already in a bad spot. You know, like if there are some things that you cannot discuss, and it doesn't even matter what it is. You know, like it doesn't matter how outrageous the idea is or how wrong it might be. If you're deplatforming people and censoring people left and right, we're already in a bad spot. And you know, on Twitter, for example, it always pains me to talk about this, because I think, you know, Jack is definitely a Bitcoiner and is doing great things, but I also think that he has very limited control on what's happening on Twitter, and it's just that the tools and the platforms that have been built in the past, they kind of have their own mind, and it's just, you know, like there are those automated systems that will flag posts, and there's, you know, someone looking at it, and you're getting nuked off the platform. And yeah, someone was nuked by just talking about self-custody, basically. And you know, people are getting nuked left and right just by talking about current events and sharing certain views of the world. And I think it's not outrageous to think once the situation gets even worse in terms of inflation and in terms of, governments really trying to push CBDCs and those kind of things, you'll get muted and deplatformed and delisted or shadow banned or outright banned just by, talking about Bitcoin and talking about inflation, talking about how, prices are moving in the wrong direction, how you're not allowed to, take enough cash out of your ATM just to survive the next week. So I think it's definitely in the cards. And I think people should be aware of that and just set themselves up to deal with this kind of, which means having side channel communications to other people, using other platforms as well, being just more, more anti-fragile, if you want to use the term, like set yourself up so that it's harder to silence and deplatform you. And I think a lot of people are doing that already, not only using Twitter, but launching a Substack or starting their own blog or moving also to Mastodon or cross-posting there and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be important in the future.
No, I totally agree. And I think it's funny too. One of the things that just had me cackling not too long ago was like a couple weeks back when Jack mentioned or posted about hyperinflation, and multiple, like numerous like economists and like mainstream journalists and stuff retweeting says this is so dangerous. This is unbelievably reckless. Jack needs to be banned from Twitter and all this stuff. And it struck me how fucking stupid the mainstream view of this is. That economics is just, if you talk about something too much, it'll just happen. We could just induce hyperinflation by tweeting about it too much. Like,
don't talk about anti-gravity. We might all just float into space.
People actually believe that shit. Like, they actually believe it. And it's hard to wrap your head around, like, when you have some totem of sense about what reality is, like, and it's crazy. But I think it's pretty much inevitable that at some point the United States government puts Bitcoin on its balance sheet in reserves. And I think we're going to start seeing probably within the next year a lot of particularly smaller countries, El Salvador. I think people are going to really start following their example. It looks like Singapore is potentially on the horizon for something similar. And I think that's going to steamroll quick. And it will be when the United States puts Bitcoin on their reserves that there will be two things that trigger in my mind. The first is, holy shit, that's great, amazing, Bitcoin's becoming the reserve. And then the other will be, holy shit, they're going to 6102 everything in exchanges. Because that is the only reason they did that to gold, is because gold was their reserve. So as soon as Bitcoin is the US reserve, I think it will become a matter of national security to take everybody's Bitcoin. And I sure as shit, like, banned account, absolutely, I agree. They'll 6102 everything on Coinbase, and Coinbase will not even they will bend the knee. They will bend the knee before, when they even get a whiff that is being suggested. They'll go ahead and just lock down everybody's account, and they'll they'll put their chapstick on so that they don't everything's nice when they're the government.
No, they really will. I mean, they'll be kissing the boot.
Coinbase will do everything. They will. Good God, they might as well be the perfect example of just like, let me hold your hand, and lift up your cape or your veil as we walk down the red carpet or whatever. Because Jesus Christ, I cannot imagine having my Bitcoin anywhere near that company right now.
Yeah, I mean, they've proven themselves over and over and over again to be basically enemies of Bitcoin. So yeah. I co-sign everything 100%. The guy just said. So that will not come as a surprise.
How funny was that then to see Brian Armstrong flipping out about the SEC not cooperating with him or something? Like, and was he basically like, we've done everything right. We've done what,
guys.
We're just a shitcoin casino, please. We just want to make our money. That's what I don't understand for Bitcoin is, there's so many places to buy. You know what I mean? Like Strike. Like I know it's not available to everybody, but when I just was like, I gotta see this if this is really like no fees. I bought and I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing.
It is.
Yeah, but I mean I think with the hyperinflation and Laser Hodl has talked about make the cost of tyranny really expensive. And so in my own personal life, I mean, Gigi's doing that with, because your wife might not even know what your NIM is, Gigi. That's how good your OPSEC could be. She have no idea who Gigi is.
It's actually not that good. But yeah, but there definitely are people that they take the proper precautions, and I think everyone could be more careful, myself included, obviously. But I think, I mean, it's very hard. It's very, very hard to predict even what's going to happen in the next 6 weeks. But 6 months from now, forget it, because it can, it's a spectrum how kind of chaotic and violent the transition period will be, and it can be kind of peaceful as well. Like Saifedean talks about this a lot. By Bitcoin, just by way of existing, puts some checks and balances onto the monetary policy of governments, and it is there as an option to move towards, and it is this pressure valve kind of that can keep things from exploding. Like if you have this pressure release valve, then it can turn out way better than most people think, because I think most it's in human nature to only see the bad and concentrate and focus on the bad, and just have the worst case scenario in your mind all the time, and stock up on ammo and food and build a bunker and and all that jazz. And I'm not saying you should not be doing that. I think you should definitely be prepared. And again, if you're very easily attacked, then you should just try to make baby steps to increase your odds of success no matter what comes, kind of, and you just spoke about this in terms of make attacks costly. And I think that's in all areas of life. That's how things work, that's how regular security works. That's how that's how whether you know it or not, that's how you design your life. Basically, it's just that usually the environment is very stable, and so there is not too many things to think about. And we might be heading in an unstable environment, but it's still not clear to me how unstable it truly gets, because it's not clear to me, what's on the table in terms of valid moves. The range is quite big. It could be, for example, in Europe, it could be the euro crumbling, and I don't see the European Union coming together and adopting Bitcoin as their monetary standard. But it's also not absolutely impossible, especially if some other nations did it before them, or some countries seceding from the European Union and doing their own thing and so on. So there's just, I just want to also bring in a more global perspective, because of course everyone is focused in the US because it's the powerhouse of the world, and what happens to the US dollar is the most important thing. But the US dollar will be the last thing that crashes, I think. Like every other currency will either dollarize or hyperinflate before that, and so yeah, it will play out in the next couple of years. So it's going to be exciting, to say the least.
And I mean, if the US dollar, yeah, because it'll be the last one. But conversely, if the U.S. experiences hyperinflation, that wrecks everything, because
except for Bitcoiners.
Yeah, except for Bitcoiners, because that's actually what
Bitcoin not affected.
Luke and I talked about a little bit about was previous hyperinflation scenarios were isolated events. It was isolated within borders, and just the people that were pegged to that currency. But if it happens in the US, oh my God, that is going to be a shit show that takes down the world. So I mean, you said it'll be the last to go, but I mean, what happens when it does go? What happens whenever the price of goods and services doubles in a 2-month period?
I think genuinely that by the time we get there, I think there's a degree of it can't happen until there's enough way to release the pressure. Like, the reason the value of the dollar would collapse, of a global reserve currency would collapse, is because people are taking their money out, their value out of the currency and putting it into something else, which necessitates something has to be able to hold that value. There has to be a thing big enough, something liquid enough, whether it's a million things all together, everybody's buying houses and cars, or just any piece of shit that they can get their hands on that's less of a piece of shit than the dollar. But because of that, like there are trillions of dollars in bonds and all this stuff that do not have a way out. They don't have an exit. So it's propping up, it's preventing the possibility of hyperinflation because there's nowhere to take that $1 trillion outside of the bonds or the dollar, like with that dollar denominated asset. And so the fact that, Gigi's 100% right. I think the dollar is going to be the last one because it is the global reserve. Every time one of these other ones collapses, the dollar gets stronger. The dollar gets more tied into the global financial system rather than less, even though it's in a shit situation too. Because again, they need an exit. All the smaller currencies need a place to move those billions and even trillions of dollars, and that's where it is right now. The dollar is the exit. But it's just the last domino. They're just skipping. There's like a trail of 50 dominoes here, and the first 4 are falling, and they're exiting. They're taking their money out of those dominoes, and they're just putting it in the end domino. Like they're just like, I gotta rush and put it over here. But it's still just gonna fall all the way to the last one. And so I tend to think Safe is actually onto something when he talks about the fact that there's this potential of actually having an alternative system grow up alongside of it and actually prevent some of the worst consequences of this sort of a collapse, because we are all so deeply interconnected. And I also agree with Gigi here. I don't think like European Union will just like up and just like, oh, we're going to adopt Bitcoin. I think it'll be more that 10% of the population in all of those countries adopt Bitcoin, and they become the new rock of the economy, and the European Union just kind of withers into irrelevance, which I think really that's kind of what all these political institutions are doing now. They're becoming so incompetent and so grossly corrupt that people are just like, fuck you so much. Like, I don't want any part of this, and I think that's very likely what we see. That was the birth of the United States, like the American ideal, before it was, 2 years later it was corrupted into bullshit. But like that was the birth of the idea of like, the people are going to do this. The politicians aren't coming to save us. Like they're never even a part of this. Like this is us. We are the ones doing this. And I think people are going to take the reins and they're going to take charge of their life. And Bitcoin is at the heart of protecting everybody who wants to do that.
Yeah, it's kind of beautiful, and I see it in the same way. I like, first of all, it's beautiful that Bitcoin is just there, and you as an individual can choose to use it and use it to your advantage and start saving in it and use it for your transactions and whatnot. So I think, especially if you're somewhat privileged and are in a country that still works, it's a very different story if you're starving in the streets and you barely have a smartphone, and then like the US dollar works probably better than Bitcoin or some Lightning wallet and so on. So, but if
20% inflation for them is no big deal, like
yeah, exactly. But if you're like if you have somewhat of a stable life and have some income and just get on a Bitcoin saving plan and just like if you're watching the markets only a little bit and the world stage only a little bit, you might want to just set up a Bitcoin savings plan and take some of your earnings and stuff them into there and just see what happens, and you'll be in a much better situation than the rest of your peers probably. And I see it in the same way, and I think the beautiful thing about it is it is all kind of interrelated, because I mean, like the clown world meme is really strong right now. And I think a lot of people realize that just it's not only the monetary policy that's broken, it's just most of policy in general. And I think it's so poetic and beautiful as the clown level increases, as the clownishness of the world increases, Bitcoinization just gets accelerated. More and more people are gonna see through it and use Bitcoin as this rallying cry and anchor of sanity, and just have something that cannot lie to you and cannot be manipulated. And I think we see this playing out right now. Like there's so much clown shit going on, and a lot of Bitcoiners are currently being minted.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've noticed, it's the transition in your view of the world and finances, but like I don't check the Bitcoin price. Like I kind of find it on like the edges of the periphery of what I look at, where people are talking about it. But it's the only stable thing, like as far as outside of like my family and stuff like that, that's stable in your personal life. Yeah, because I can't trust the government, I can't trust any politician, I can't trust the banks, I can't trust anything. I all I can do is trust myself, and then it's like, oh, there's this one thing outside of my family and myself that I can trust to stay the same, and that is Bitcoin. I can put it in there and it will remain the same.
And it's like of course, like I think every single Bitcoin I had this kind of epiphany. It's actually Bitcoin that's the stable thing. It might not be stable yet in purchasing power, like it's still monetizing, but from a systems perspective, it's the most stable system you can imagine, and it's definitely more stable than anything else we have. And that's also why I think that getting into Bitcoin is a one-way street. Stacking sats definitely is a one-way street. You're not going back, like if unless you absolutely have to and your hand is forced, like you will not. Very much like people in Venezuela, if you're a Bitcoiner in Venezuela, you're not going back to the Bolivar, you're not cashing out, like you're not returning to the old system. And I think this,
what are you cashing out to?
Exactly. And so this process will just continue to happen, and consequently the number of Bitcoiners will grow, and the orange circle will expand, and more people will have these kind of insights. And that's also in part why it's an exponential process, because you're going to talk to your friends and family will see that you're relatively better off than someone else that did not do this, and then the cycle kind of repeats. And again, it's kind of it starts with such a simple system and so simple incentives, and the consequences that we see playing out right now are absolutely profound on so many levels. It kind of boggles the mind.
Yeah, and like even little things, like I know my sister probably I think is a listener at this point, but her and her husband, they got married in June, and when the price of Bitcoin was like 35,000, and we gave them their Bitcoin, like their gift in Bitcoin, and then they saw it grow, and they were like, oh, hey, look at that, because I mean I've been talking about this for so long, and everybody was looking, and so then my brother-in-law comes to me, he's like, yeah, I'm thinking, put like $50 a paycheck away, and I was like, dollar cost average, man, you figured it out on your own, like. And then my sister all of a sudden goes, like a couple weeks ago, she's like, hey, I heard that interview you did with, I was like, what, you're a listener now? Like that's crazy, And so it's just deal.
Yeah,
it's like, all of a sudden, like there's you see it start to spread in your own life, and it's that exponential growth. So I mean, as we get there, I mean, do you guys, there's all the talk about cycles, and is this going to be another repeat of one of the other cycles, or is this it? Is this the end of cycles? I mean, do you guys see hyper Bitcoinization as the thing that happens out of this, or is it going to be a slow pressure release?
You want to go first, Guy? No.
Oh, whoops, I'm muted. Yeah. I think there's two reasons why the cycle as we know it is ending. I don't think it's hyper Bitcoinization in the sense that, oh, we're all just using Bitcoin next year, because it's so easy to discount, or what's the word? Yeah, underestimate just how much work needs to be done to realize. You look at the internet in the early 2000s, you'd have thought, damn, it's ubiquitous, right? We're done. But look at where we are now versus what the internet was in 2000s. The internet practically didn't even exist in comparison to what it is today. And
my GeoCities on Yahoo still existed.
Right. And I think we're going to see largely the same thing with Bitcoin. But I think what we've already seen this quote unquote cycle is the end of the idea of this 4-year rally, then bear market. I think it's probably going to look a lot like it's been in the last 2 years. Just a rally, a little small bear market, a little small rally, a little small bear market. And I think there's two reasons. One is because the liquidity in the network or the system, whatever you want to call it, is becoming large enough that the players, like the major money in the system, are making much longer term plays. And when that happens, and I can kind of see like a microcosm of this in myself, is I only get really excited in Bitcoin right now when you have like big red candles. Like when the price drops, I get really kind of like, oh goody, like I get really excited, and I like oh shit, okay, I can really stack, this week, and the price is going up is fun, I enjoy it. But really what I see is that like my fold wheel spins are like 1400 sats instead of 1800 sats. And I'm like, man, damn it. I see the amount that I'm stacking decrease. So that long-term thinking and the position of like, oh, I just need more Bitcoin, I think it's going to greatly diminish those swings. And we're just going to see a gradual, steady uptrend. And I think the people who are expecting another 1.5 to 2 year just miserable bear market after another run will probably be the ones that get their ass handed to them that calls the next rally. But then in addition is the inflation rate isn't that much of a difference anymore. There isn't that significant. So when your inflation rate is 10% and it gets cut in half to 5% at the halving, that's a huge freaking deal regarding the demand that's coming into the system and how much that's going to affect the price. So the halving has an enormous impact when you're talking about 50% inflation to 25%, 10% to 5%. But when you're talking about 1.7% to like 0.8%, it's not as meaningful. The miners, the new issuance is no longer the thing driving the major dynamic between whether or not new demand rises the price or not. It's no longer that big buffer. It's now just this tiny little corner of what's going on, and now it's all demand. So I think we will continue to have these rallies and crashes, quote unquote, cycles, but I think they will be shorter, and it will basically be one giant curve up, and it will just be messy and volatile like Bitcoin always is. But I don't think that clean 4-year cycle will be nearly as prevalent this time around, and certainly go another halving out, it'll basically be gone.
I really like what Guy was saying, but I actually have to disagree on multiple accounts, kind of. And of course,
oh, right. Here we go. I knew you guys didn't like each other for a reason.
That's why we basically never talk. We
Celebrity deathmatch. Let's go.
Exactly. No,
Bitcoin celebrity deathmatch. We just stumbled on something there.
Of course, no one has a crystal ball. So, it's, I really like the phrase. It's very hard to make predictions, especially about the future. So who knows what's going to happen,
Especially about the
future. But still, I think human psychology, which is at the root of this all, doesn't change too drastically. And I think it's really hard to get Bitcoin and understand Bitcoin. It doesn't matter how far along Bitcoin already is, kind of. It's real. I think the hardest thing in Bitcoin is to drop your fiat mindset. And what I mean by that is to drop the short-term thinking and drop thinking in your like unit of account as US dollar or as the euro or as the yen, and switch to sats and switch to a Bitcoin standard and do your personal internal accounting in sats, which is what Guy was already describing. Like he's thinking in sats. How many sats can I stack? I have a certain cash flow and I want to maximize the number of sats that I can stack. And of course, like if you are thinking along these lines, you're immediately in somewhat trading territory already, like because if there's a downturn, you want to stack more. So you might want to save up to be able to stack more for this event and so on. Because if you're that's why I think just having automatic saving plans and just removing yourself from the equation completely is so insanely powerful, because it's psychologically way easier, because you never have to think about these things ever, and if you set up your life that you have no additional money to spend no matter what you do, and you're always stacking with every single paycheck or every single day, every single week, then buying the dip is not even possible. You would have to sell a kidney or something to buy the dip, and of course people do. So,
hey, you got two of them.
There you go.
Well, why do you need two?
But I think in terms of cycles, I think, and that's where the human psychology aspect, I think, comes in, because it takes usually 2 or 3 touch points with Bitcoin to understand it and to not dismiss it anymore. And I think we are in now for the third global touch point, kind of, so I think it will click for a lot of people. And those people have a lot of liquid assets, and they will like just like every one of us they will FOMO in at the top. And then there is no new money flowing in, like Guy said in the beginning, there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of purchasing power out there, and it has to move into Bitcoin somehow. And I think we will see these moves continue to come into waves as Bitcoin penetrates global consciousness, and as more people realize, oh crap, Bitcoin is still not dead. Like I maybe I dabbled in it the last time, and now it's suddenly, now it's suddenly at 100K, and last time I looked at it, it was like at 8K or something, and that's how these things work usually. But that's not where you make the switch to, okay, I'm doing all my internal accounting in sats now. You still have a fiat mindset. You're thinking in dollars, you're thinking in euros, you're trying to trade this thing, you're trying to maximize gains. You don't realize that this is the monetary base layer of the future, and so on and so forth, all the things that we take for granted now. And it takes a very long time to wrap your head around that, because you need to understand money and what money is. You need to learn all these things. And of course, I think this time window where you can actually learn these things and benefit from them will close, because if the internet and mobile phones and other technologies are any indication, people, like society at large, will force Bitcoin upon everyone else, and that brings me to hyper-Bitcoinization. Like, what is hyper-Bitcoinization? How do you define it? What kind of... It's the same question can be asked about hyperinflation. How do you define hyperinflation? Like where is the cutoff point where regular inflation gets into hyperinflation territory? And I really like the saying of a friend of mine, Dennis, who is also working on BTC Pay server. So shout out to him. And he mentioned to me once that, hyper-Bitcoinization is kind of like a personal thing. You kind of decide it for yourself. And I kind of agree. I know what he means, like if you have 10,000 Bitcoin right now, hyper-Bitcoinization for you is in the past. It's like, it's already over. It's already done. Like you're probably done stacking, like you know what I mean? Like it's, if you have tens of thousands of Bitcoin, it's hyper-Bitcoinization definitely is in the past, because when you were accumulating and stacking, it was like outrageous to think about $100 Bitcoin, and so I think as Bitcoin monetizes and as the circle of Bitcoiners expands, we will have more and more people that just move to a Bitcoin standard completely, and hyper-Bitcoinization for them will be in the past, and they will associate with other Bitcoiners, and they will buy from shops that accept Bitcoin. They make deals and have business relationships with other Bitcoiners and Bitcoin only companies and so on. And we see this emerge right now. And of course, you can pick certain events where it will be very obvious that hyper-Bitcoinization has now happened for everyone, just like internetization has happened for everyone. Like if like 98% of all the data in the world is flowing through the internet, okay, then it's over. Very much like with smartphones. When was the point when smartphones really took over? It's really hard to tell. Like, was it when the iPhone came out? It was probably later. Was it when Android came out and surpassed the iPhone in terms of how many users have a phone and so on? It's really hard to tell. But we are past that point. And similarly for hyper-Bitcoinization, I think, for example, when oil is traded in Bitcoin, we're definitely very far along already, and if the majority of the countries of the world have Bitcoin on their balance sheet or it's legal tender there, then you can say, okay, that's when hyper-Bitcoinization happened. But it will be hard to define, and I think we'll see these waves of adoption continue because it's like a very big psychological switch that you have to make.
Now, let me clarify, because I don't disagree with any of that. My
Good debate strategy.
The complaint. Well, I mean, I really don't.
Yeah.
But my claim about the cycles wasn't that we won't have waves. It will be that it won't be around the halving.
Okay.
That will have. I mean, I think this past wave was a pretty significant wave. We went from $6,000 to 60, and then back down to 29. I think we're going to see that shit over and over and over again. So
you think it just might spread out longer?
I think it might happen every year, every 2 years. Like it'll just be a constant thing. Like that's just kind of how Bitcoin will move. But there will still be horribly overbought, like psychotic green candles at the top, and
definitely
significant crashes. Like I have a hard time seeing Bitcoin ever not being that, honestly. And if it's that forever, I'm okay with that. I don't even care. Like this is somehow after you do this a couple of times, it's just like, yeah, this is normal.
You just become numb to it. You're like,
it just is what it is. I mean, I think it actually will stabilize and become so liquid that it's impossible to have those moves. But if it didn't, I'm still happy with my Bitcoin standard.
I think one of the like Has McCook has a really nice way of thinking about this, and a really nice framework on how to properly think about this, because you need to have some buying pressure always for a price floor to hold. And so in the end, it is economic activity that has to move into Bitcoin. For now, it's mostly people that are earning fiat and buying Bitcoin because they're stacking. So for now, one of the most important aspects is basically auto DCAing, in the sense that because one-time buys are kind of meaningless, like they don't define any kind of price floor in the large sense. And I think we will see the number of people expand drastically as fiat currencies are failing, and this will be an individual decision and a company decision. And we already have family-run businesses that are doing this, and just whatever they earn, they save and store in Bitcoin and not in fiat anymore. And depending on the location, it might be like 90% in some places, and it might be like 10% in other places. And we see Michael Saylor doing exactly this. Like get as much cash flow as you can, even take out debt, and just use Bitcoin as your savings vehicle. And it definitely is a savings vehicle, because Michael Saylor, as he said publicly multiple times, he's not in, like, he will basically never sell, like he will hold it for 100 years, and so whatever is the currency in 100 years, you can transfer it back to this currency, or just use Bitcoin straight, as I believe will be the case, and buy whatever assets you want to buy, and just reinvest it in more productive assets. Because again, like, we are in this monetization period, so it makes a lot of sense to do this. But once everything is evened out and Bitcoin is fully monetized, it doesn't not make sense to hold it if you actually want to increase your wealth. Like you have to actually do something that produces value. So I give the gold bucks this this point, like it's a valid critique of Bitcoin once hyper-Bitcoinization is in the past.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because there's that like DCA army basically right now that's propping it up. But then, like you said, that until things are exchanged, basically, is that what you were saying? You were saying until goods are exchanged for Bitcoin, like on a higher level, then you won't have a price floor. Does that kind of what like electricity setting the price floor does right now?
I don't think that has anything to do with it, because everything in Bitcoin is kind of connected, and everything is very nuanced. So take everything I'm going to say with a large grain of salt. But in a sense, what miners are doing is they're protecting the past, like they're defining the present and the future. Like they are blocks are about the ordering of things, and mining is basically it's distributed timestamping when it comes down to it. And the side effect is that you secure the past by this accumulative layer of energy, if you will. But in terms of price, like it's I would say well, it's really hard to say. Like, first of all, we don't know in Bitcoin how much security we need for the past, like in my mind, Bitcoin is so over-secured kind of, but it's some people are of the opinion Bitcoin will only be secure when the whole network eats up 51% of the energy output of the world, and I can get behind that as well. I think I think it's an interesting way to think about it. Things, but of course, like miners have to sell Bitcoin and they have real expenses, and this is definitely some selling pressure as well. And but it's unclear to me in the current environment how much this affects the Bitcoin price, because what we're currently seeing and what Michael Saylor is talking about a lot as well is, in the current financial climate outside of Bitcoin, it's very easy to get free fiat basically, and so miners can just mine and hold, and so the selling pressure goes away, kind of, like you suddenly you don't have to sell Bitcoin to continue operating. You can just raise more VC money, just hold Bitcoin or get loans and sell a fraction of the Bitcoin to service your loan, kind of. So I think all of these things are very, very interesting, but I don't think that price is related to energy in that sense, because just humor me for a second. Let's say we cracked a nut of cold fusion and we have fusion reactors and energy is basically free. Would the Bitcoin price go to zero? No, I don't think it would. And I also think, it's not that
Bitcoin would be more
is
secure than ever.
exactly. Yeah. Because you could secure Bitcoin basically for free, and it's kind of like, how much human time would you? It basically becomes a race between the believers and the attackers, and how much time and of course, like building the damn fusion reactors would not be free, but it's like if 51% of the fusion reactors are serving for the good and protecting the Bitcoin network and 49% are attacking it, Bitcoin is still perfectly fine. I mean, again, take everything I say with a grain of salt, because, for 51% attack, you need like 40% of the hash power or something and so on. So don't kill me in the comments that not everything I say is 100% accurate technically, but you get the basic idea. So what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to drive home with that thought experiment is that, in essence, the energy consumption is not directly coupled to the price, not necessarily.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense once we get to a completely green, renewable energy source or something, which everybody, touts Bitcoin will push us towards. That doesn't mean that the price of Bitcoin is going to go down, or have a price floor. It actually makes, because less people are going to be selling, because you don't have to sell to pay energy costs.
I mean, it's such a great question. You could discuss this probably for days. Does price follow hash rate, or is it the other way around? Yeah, and it's exactly like, that's the main question, basically. Like it's.
I mean, it's chicken and the egg. Like, they're related. Like they have a relationship, and they both affect each other. The hash rate props up the price, not because of a floor on the cost of energy or anything, but just because the hash rate indicates a longer term perspective on the security and viability of Bitcoin. Whereas the price can, double this week and get cut in half next week. So the hash rate, I would say, is a much more, let's look 5 months out. What's the relevant foundation that this thing is based on? And I think the hash rate is a much more gradual indication of its long-term prospects. Whereas at the exact same time, the hash rate responds to the price, because miners dump on more hardware, they set up more, they find every drop of energy that they can anywhere to plug into the Bitcoin system when Bitcoin goes up 6x. So they are absolutely 100% related, and they both interact with each other. But I don't think either has any. I mean, just like the chicken doesn't, the egg doesn't exist because the chicken, and the chicken doesn't exist because of the egg. Like, they are just both part of the same system. But I like the idea of trying to define hyper Bitcoinization, of like, what is the point? And when you really kind of start thinking about like ways to like some sort of metric to totem this against, I guess you could say, you realize it kind of looks like it might not be as long term as like I say, let's take an example. So let's say it's half the population having more than half of their liquid capital as Bitcoin. So what we've seen right now, I think it's like 30 or 40%, I believe, of the US population now has like a small allocation of Bitcoin.
No, I think it's less. It wasn't too long
maybe
ago.
Maybe that was like the younger demographic.
Yeah,
maybe that's what that was like. That might have been like 20 to 30 year olds or something.
Because we just crossed into early adopters very recently, and that was like 12 point something percent or so.
Okay. Yeah. I must be thinking of like a younger demographic then. I just remember seeing percentages that like were really, really surprising to me. But let's take the example of 50% of liquid capital for half the population. If half the population puts in like 1 or let's say 2% of their capital into Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin goes 25x, we have that. We have 50% of the people with 50% of their liquid capital in Bitcoin. And when it becomes a dominant part of your portfolio, I feel like there's this shift where you just think of it very, very differently. You're like, holy crap, like this is the thing I have that's valuable, you know? So I don't know. It'd be really interesting. Like 25x in Bitcoin just it's not that hard, you know?
That crazy.
It's not that crazy. It's certainly not the first time that has happened. So it's interesting. I don't know if that would qualify quite as hyper Bitcoinization, but it would be a decent thing to measure against. You know, half the population considering that as the most important thing that they own. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. That changes the perspective. That changes the political environment. That changes the cultural environment. That changes everything. So I don't know.
The way the finances work at that point, because one of the things I love about Bitcoin is that the moment you take that money out of the bank and put it in Bitcoin, you know that it can never be used again by the banks for rehypothecation, for fractional reserve banking, for all those things. So it's just like, it's an exponential power that you're pulling away from. And like, even now, I mean, I don't think I'll get in trouble for this, but we had been planning on constructing a house, and then we were waiting. I had some things in personal life that were going on that we were trying to get figured out, and then all of a sudden, the realtor, they were just taking their time. They weren't putting any pressure on us, small town USA, you know what I mean? They're just like, you know, we understand. And then boom, all of a sudden they contacted, they're like, hey, this house isn't going on the market yet. Let's do it. You're going to love it. It's exactly what you want. We literally looked at it 3 days ago, put in an offer, accepted, boom, we're off and running. And I went to the mortgage. I was like, how small of a down payment can I make? And they were like, all right, you know, don't you want to do like 20% down, you know? And I'm sitting there, no, because like debt is so cheap right now. Yeah. So to me, it's just, I love on the personal end looking at that play where I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm going to continue, instead of putting that and taking any money out of Bitcoin to put on the down payment, I'm just going to keep stacking sats. And like the guy said to me, he said, why would you do that? I said, do you think whatever, you know, I don't want to give away the amount of money that I'm spending, so I'm going to censor that. But you know, I was like, do you think that is going to be as valuable as it is today in 30 years? And he was like, thought about it. And he's like an older, like boomer, like mortgage broker, you know, and he was just like, no. And I was like, exactly. That's why I'm willing to pay that off forever. You know, my parents' first house, if they had, Oh yeah, frame it like a dollar. The first dollar you earn.
Yeah.
It's just
No,
crazy to think that they're giving away debt as cheap as they are.
no, I know. It's absolutely nuts. And I 100%, I mean, that's what we did with our house back in 2017, I think, when we bought this. I put practically nothing down. And even did some like government subsidy, like sort of loan type sort of thing, just to prevent from having to sell any Bitcoin if I could. And I mean, we still sold some Bitcoin to get the house, but it was not to put down payments on the house.
Yeah.
Um, and But what's funny is like when somebody asks that, and I think this is such a powerful indication of just how absurd inflation is when people think um, there isn't, or that this like 4% CPI or whatever this awful, they're just so stupid. CPI is the worst, most god awful, idiotic measurement that there could be.
Especially when you
Um,
take meat out.
or when you take meat out, but when you take housing, when you take out the stock market, when you take out gas, when you take out like, because the CPI, the consumer price index, Safedine just kills it in the fiat standard when he talks about CPI, because it's a unitless measurement. Imagine trying to measure your house without a unit, without something to measure it with. Just be like, oh, well, it's like kind of slightly larger than the house to the left and slightly less than the house to the right. It's like, well, how big is the house to the left and the right? Oh, it's slightly bigger than mine on the, like, but at the exact same time, the CPI is a response to what you can afford. So if the price of meat doubles and everybody was buying red meat, but the price of chicken is less, it's half the price of red meat. Well, then everybody stops buying red meat and starts buying poultry instead, cheaper, lower quality meat. And suddenly it looks like the CPI hasn't moved at all because the basket is now poultry instead of red meat. But the actual price of the good has doubled. But because people can't afford it anymore because the price doubled, they're buying something different. So CPI suddenly no inflation when the quality and the substance that they have purchased has decreased significantly. So to frame it in the context of the house, is it like, don't you want to put 20% down on your house? I would ask them like, well, in the context of the value of the dollar, if I don't put anything down, what's going to happen to won't the price of my house increase by 20% in 5 years?
Mhm.
Like, isn't that something that everybody says, like everybody knows that happens? I'll have 20% down and I won't have to
Yeah.
do anything. I'll have
Yeah.
20% equity in my house just by taking out a loan, paying absolutely nothing, doing nothing productive for society, just taking the money and watching the value of my house go up, and I'll be 20% down. All I
They
gotta do
were
is wait
like,
for the dollar to die. I like to just watch the value of the dollar bleed out while I hold this high maintenance consumption quote unquote asset that everybody now treats as savings because the dollar's shit.
yeah, well, I don't think a house is savings anymore. I
Yeah.
think people are starting to realize that.
People are beginning to, but it's crazy that whole generations have been led to believe that a house is an investment. It's
Yeah.
not in a hard money environment. It's not. It's what you're doing is you're protecting yourself partially from the destruction of your currency. There's no sensible reality where a consumption asset, a living in a house that takes ridiculous maintenance, that in 20 years needs a new roof, needs a new AC unit every 10 years, that rots, that you got to repaint, that you got to Clorox the outside of the house so it doesn't get covered in mildew. That is not an asset. That is not a store of value. That is a freaking liability. It is only because of the state of our dollar that ever changed to something as absurd as this is the bulk of my wealth, and it's going to go quote unquote up every year because the dollar is crap.
Gigi, I see you shaking your head there. Do you have something to add? It's hard to
Yeah,
read
no.
it's hard to read your face.
Yeah.
I try to read your glasses.
When we're talking about the current monetary situation of the US dollar, I'm just shaking my head internally all the time. No, it's really messed up, and it really is kind of messed up that we are in this situation, and this is basically what everyone was forced to do the last couple of decades. Like that's as Guy just said, like that's what everyone believes. Everyone believes that just get a house. It's basically your savings vehicle, and it always goes up in price and so on. And what I think, like, I think it's really useful sometimes to go down to the absolute basics. Just strip everything that's all the convoluted language and all the all the fancy economics. Strip all of it away. We had a certain amount of US dollars, for example, and everything you did in terms of saving, investing, and earning money, the pool of US dollars just in the last 18 months alone expanded by like 30% or more, something like that, like let's pick 30% as the number now. So if you invested in something, if your house went up by 30% the last 18 months, you're even, you gained absolutely nothing in terms of purchasing power. And also, why should you gain anything in purchasing power in the first place if you're holding just a house, like that I think that was Guy's point as well. And I think it's very helpful to think about it in that way, because raise your hand if you got a salary increase by more than 30% in the last 18 months. Not many people can raise their hand, I think. And I think that just thinking about it in those very, very stupid terms opens the eyes of a lot of people to just see very clearly what is going on. And I think what's also interesting is, for example, every single US dollar denominated model that you had of the world 18 months ago is now off by 30%. At least, just that's just the way it is. Like it doesn't matter what you're trying to model, if it is Bitcoin or something else or what have you, or if it is like your personal goal of becoming a millionaire or something, like it's like the measurement is so messed up that you just have to reconsider everything. And I think that's one thing in like very inflationary environments and hyperinflationary environments, that all the measurements break down. And that's why cooperation becomes so insanely difficult, because you just have the language of value breaks down. And I think we experience and we see the beginnings of that right now, and it has very interesting, it pops up in very interesting and also funny ways, like the meme stocks are one aspect, people aping into NFTs are another aspect. People buying Pokemon and Magic the Gathering cards are another aspect. People, again, like Saifedean also says, if the money breaks down, everything else becomes money. So people use everything for money. Houses and whiskeys and expensive cars and watches and playing cards and so on. And I think I
love that line. When money breaks down, everything becomes money. Yeah.
It's so true. Everyone knows that kind of, that's your kind of preservation instincts kick in, and you just ape into something just because it's better than putting the money on a bank account or under your mattress. And everyone knows that instinctively, whether you understand money or not. This, and that's why you're buying, like the fifth Rolex watch or what have you, or that's why you're buying a house that you're not living in and are not renting out. Like that's it's kind of funny how this works. That just by observing the behavior of people, you can kind of see what they know and understand, but they will not be able to verbalize what's going on. That they don't understand it deeply what's going on.
Do you guys ever feel like a dirty fiat person? Like you buy something at a store and you're just like, oh my God, I cannot believe I just spent that money. Like I look at something and I'm like, this thing that I just bought is going to have value for 10 minutes. Like, this is garbage. Why did I buy this?
I don't experience this anymore. I think I have a little safety sitting on my shoulder, and every time I want to grab a candy bar or something, he just slaps me straight in the face. And so,
do you know how much soy is in that?
Exactly. No, it's a funny question. I mean, I think also you should kind of treat yourself from time to time and whatever. Like, I think you can also go insane if you never spend anything. But
I'll tell you, I definitely have that feeling from time to time if I end up spending like a little bit of money and I'm like, man, this was so stupid. In fact, a couple of times, like I've kind of turned around and sold something. Like I bought a 3 years ago now, I bought a 360-degree camera thing, which I actually got a pretty decent use out of it, actually. We took a trip to Switzerland and like went around Europe a little bit, and had a blast, and I still love the pictures and stuff. I got it, but after I got back, I was like, it was like $500 or something like that, and I was like, am I ever going to use this again? Like, like maybe on the next time I have like a big trip. And I immediately sold it. Like after like 4 days when I was back, I was like, I'm not going to take this anywhere again, and sold it and bought back Bitcoin. So like I
think that investment worked out.
Oh yeah. It worked out great. But I'll tell you, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but Fold has very much changed how not to fucking shill Fold on this, but
hey, please do. I want them to be a sponsor. That'd be great.
No, it's actually like, because every time I buy something, it's actually kind of changed my perspective, which I almost hate that it's kind of fun to buy stuff because like I get a spin, particularly if it's like a big, like luckily, like what I've actually been doing is paying my bills, like paying some of my bills early so that like when I have like extra spends or whatever. But if I'm making like 2 or 3% back in Bitcoin, it becomes like I purchase things so that I'm stacking Bitcoin, but it's a little bit perverse because I could be wasting fiat money to get 1% back in Bitcoin. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, so you got to be careful with that. You can't let that. It's poisoning it. It's making fiat fun again. No, that's not cool.
Make fiat fun again. I've been trying to adopt a mindset where like, something. I mean, I've got kids, so like, I see something at Target that's like some kind of Paw Patrol toy, that's like complete garbage made of terrible plastic, and it's going to be worthless in like a week. And I'm like, if I'm going to buy that for them, I have to be willing to buy that and put that amount of money into Bitcoin. So like I make it more expensive
like
for me, so that it's like, okay, if I'm going to buy $20 worth of worthless stuff, I need to be willing to spend 20 on the worthless stuff, 20 on the Bitcoin. And I've also been trying to like,
you should tell your kids that you're doing that every time too. Like they should know. It's like, okay, well that means we have to buy this amount of Bitcoin. Can we afford that? Have you looked at your budget, son?
Yeah. Have you? Well, dude, my son, my oldest is, he's going to start earning Bitcoin for his what's it called?
Chores.
Yeah, chores. Allowance and all that, because he hears me talk about it all the time, and so he was I don't even think he knows what dollars are, but he was like, he's like, I'd like to get Bitcoin. All right, let's do it. Like he's gonna be like the richest like chore doer in the world. Like he's gonna make so much money, and once he's older, he's gonna be like, thanks, Dad. And I'm gonna be sitting there like, damn it, I should have held it. Should have gave it to him when he turned 18. But so talking about this, and I know you guys probably got to run here shortly, but one of the topics I wanted to bring up, and we talk about like the long-term vision of where Bitcoin goes and everything like that. What do you guys think is the secret to longevity in Bitcoin? And I ask that because one of the things I see right now is, with me being openly so new to Bitcoin, so I'm trying to stay long term, as and basically you want to die a Bitcoiner. You don't want to turn into the something else. But I've seen, a lot of people, it's just so many people getting on, and like, I don't know if it's the amount of people I see on these Twitter spaces that I'm guilty of going into, but even over the last like 2 months, I've reeled back and like I'll maybe poke my ear and listen, but I don't participate as much. And I'm just like, man, how many people are going to get burned out on Bitcoin and lose their minds where they can't handle it anymore. They don't want to hear another word. Or, we see people on the verge of rage quitting online. And it's like, you guys have been in for varying lengths of time, but you've been in long enough to see, how do you survive Bitcoin and make sure that you're there till the end?
I'll go first, partly because I have to run in 5 minutes, but
Yeah.
I'll try to.
I got a hard stop at 3:30, so
I'll try to be very brief with this. I think Bitcoin derangement syndrome is a real thing, and no one is immune. I think Bitcoin can drive you crazy in multiple ways. I think we've seen that in the past. I think it is really hard to understand at first. So because there's no authority to tell you what Bitcoin is, you have to figure it out for yourself. And this is by design. It's very easy to fall prey to scammers and just wrong kind of wrong everything, and so I think it's also Bitcoin has a way to infect your mind that this can be very overbearing as well. So I think it can do your head in that way too, that it just becomes too much and then you just let it be for a while. I have no answer for you. I think the most important thing is to try to be authentic as best as you can, because I think most Bitcoiners are really good at sniffing out bullshit, and then you won't have a good time. So I think just be yourself and be authentic, and it's try to align yourself with Bitcoin as best as you can, in a sense. And if you don't know what this means, then stick around for a little bit longer. But there is a way to align yourself with Bitcoin. I think that's the way, like, to live in symbiosis with it is what you have to do.
Yeah. I think there's something important in realizing that the social environment and the social media, of Bitcoin is not Bitcoin. Like, I know I've definitely have had like a couple of maybe periods throughout my 10, 11 years ish, of I'm exhausted with this, and then either something will happen or I'll start digging into something else that will just kind of start to renew my energy in it, and I think that was really at the heart of the podcast too, is that like I was getting nowhere like the whole first year. And after like 8 months, I was definitely getting burnt out, And like, I knew I just had to push through that period to kind of find some new hook or whatever to explore. And I think just me personally, I don't think this is going to apply to everybody. I think everybody's journey is different and everybody's personality, like what they are excited about, is different. But I found digging into some other aspect around Bitcoin, like learning something new about it, has been a big thing to keep me excited. And I think the only thing that I really have not like deeply dug into, just probably because it's a little bit intimidating to me, even though I know I'll probably really enjoy it when I get there, is actually the cryptography. Is that like I want to be able to look at the the public-private key equations and like that sort of thing. I just want to be able to like, okay, well, this, like, I know what is happening here. And I haven't quite done that with like SHA-256 and ECDS, like these things. I've touched on them enough to have a degree of understanding around them. But the depth of disciplines and things around Bitcoin, you can get the basic of Bitcoin economics, but there's 1,000 hours there to unpack at minimum. You can get the basics in an hour, 2 hours. But don't stay in your corner. I think there's something very beautiful about Bitcoin, that it lends itself to wanting to understand all of the disciplines around it. Use that as motivation to dig into the philosophy you'd never read about, to really get into game theory, to like take all of these disparate studies and ideas and go with them. Become the Renaissance man, or whatever you want to say, of Bitcoin, because I think we have a very serious problem in society of segmentation, of segregating these different disciplines and these different categories as if they are all completely separate things. And, you're in the history domain, don't say anything about biology. You're over in biology, don't you dare say anything about the technical workings of the internet. That's not your domain. You stay over there. And I think there's a very profound value in having a broad view, of knowing a little bit about a lot, because there might be a $1 billion problem. It's just 10 seconds for everybody in the world, that is because of a lack of communication or a lack of understanding between somebody designing product A and somebody shipping product A. And just because neither side knows what the other person is doing or how any of it works, there's a 10-second problem for 1 billion people that just goes unaddressed. And just having that broad view, looking at how everything works and how everything connects together, is so unbelievably valuable. And I think so many of their translation problems, so many of society's major problems are translation problems, are how to bridge those gaps. And I think Bitcoin lends itself to wanting to get that big picture view so you can understand it. So explore, pull on threads, go further out and see how it relates to Bitcoin. And I think there's a lifetime of things to explore, and you won't get bored.
Amen to that.
Awesome. Well, hey guys, dude, that's great advice for everybody. Stick in the space as long as you can and keep exploring. Don't stick where you're comfortable. But Gigi, Guy, thank you guys so much for coming on. I really appreciate this. I can't wait to do this in meat space. So hopefully we can do it at Bitcoin 2022.
Yeah, man.
And we can just sit down and put beer or whiskey, whatever we want, and just sit back and have a long conversation, unrecorded.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Great conversation as always.
Yeah, man, same. And Gigi, I'll hit you up. Don't worry, I haven't forgot about our Telegram thing. Got it.
No worries.
All right, see you guys.
All right,
bye.
Later, man.